Sometimes, the hardest stories to tell are the ones that never really ended. And this one. My story is about a boy I loved more than anything, but couldn't stay with no matter how much I wanted to. People say love teaches you things, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes, love teaches you by breaking you first. And maybe, just maybe, that's why I'm finally telling this story. Not because I moved on. Not because I stopped loving him, but because some memories don't fade unless you let them breathe once again. So, this is mine. The days we loved, but couldn't stay. I still remember the first time I saw him. Not because something magical happened. Not because the world suddenly slowed down like in those dramatic movies. No, it was simpler than that. He just smiled. That's it. Just one smile. But somehow, it felt like the universe tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, "Pay attention. This one matters." And maybe that's why everything after that day feels so vivid. Like it's tattooed somewhere inside me. I didn't fall in love instantly. I fell slowly, quietly. The way rain begins. Soft, unnoticed. Until one day you realize it soaked everything. He wasn't perfect. God, no. He was messy, stubborn, sarcastic, and sometimes unbelievably annoying. But he was also the only person who saw parts of me I didn't even know I had. He listened differently. He cared differently. He loved differently. Sometimes he'd look at me like he was memorizing my face. Like he was afraid he might forget it one day. And I loved him with a and we held on to each other like the world outside didn't exist. People say young love is naive, but I think it's the most honest kind. Because young hearts, they love without strategy, without calculation, without fear, until fear finds them. I thought we were unbreakable. I thought love was enough. I thought holding his hand meant forever. But life has a way of testing the things you think are certain. And what came next? I never saw it coming. Our story didn't end because the love disappeared. It didn't end because we stopped caring. It ended because sometimes life demands sacrifices that love alone can't fight. And that's what hurts the most. Not the goodbye. Not the distance. Not the silence. What hurts is knowing. If circumstances were just a little different. If timing was just a little kinder. If life was just a bit more forgiving, maybe we would have made it. But this story isn't about regret. It's about remembering. About accepting the complicated beauty of loving someone deeply, even when they weren't meant to stay forever. So, take a breath with me. Because the real story starts now. The story of a boy, a girl, and the love that still lives quietly inside us, even after everything. You know, if someone asked me when exactly I fell for him, I don't think I could point to a single moment. Because it didn't happen suddenly. It happened quietly. In the little things. The unnoticed seconds. The soft, ordinary moments that somehow stayed. Maybe it started the day he looked at me like I wasn't just another person in the room, but someone he genuinely wanted to understand. Or maybe it was the way he said my name. Gentle, unhurried, almost like he was tasting it before speaking it aloud. Or maybe it was the way he listened. Not waiting for his turn to talk, but really listening. Like he could hear the thing somewhere between our first conversation and the 100th. I started to look for him in every room. And somewhere between our first laugh and our first long silence, he became the person I wanted to share everything with. We didn't have some dramatic beginning. We weren't one of those love at first sight couples. But we had something better. A connection that felt natural. Like we'd known each other long before we actually met. I still remember our early days. The late night calls that started with, "Are you awake?" And ended 3 hours later with, "Okay, last thing before we sleep." The way he'd send those random messages in the middle of the day like, I just remembered something stupid you said. Followed by him laughing at his own joke before I even replied. Sometimes we'd talk about life. Sometimes about dreams. Sometimes about absolutely nothing. And yet, it always felt like everything. He made boring days interesting. He made heavy days lighter. He made me feel seen. Fully, softly, honestly. One evening, I remember we were sitting outside, not talking, just watching the sky turn orange and then fade. And in that quiet moment, he looked at me and smiled the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. I swear, I felt something shift inside me. Like my heart whispered, "Oh, it's him." That's when I realized I wasn't just falling for him. I already had. And it wasn't the kind of love that makes you lose yourself. It was the kind that makes you find yourself through someone else's eyes. He made me braver. He made me softer. He made me believe in things I never said out loud. We created memories without even planning to. The long walks where our hands accidentally brushed, and neither of us moved them away. The shared playlists. The stupid inside jokes. The way he teased me just to see me get annoyed. And then immediately soften because he thought it was cute. The way he'd say, "Tell me everything." Even when he was tired. Even when I didn't know where to begin. Those moments. Those simple, fragile, beautiful moments became the foundation of us. And I held on to them like they were treasures. Because with him, every ordinary day felt a little more special. Every conversation felt a little more important. Every heartbeat felt a little more alive. You know, people think love is about grand gestures, big surprises, huge declarations. But real love, the kind that stays with you long after it's over, is built in silence, in consistency, in the comfort of knowing someone is there, even without being asked. And that's exactly what we had. We didn't plan to fall for each other. We didn't even see it coming. But somehow, life brought us together in the softest way. And for a while, it felt like nothing could separate us. For a while, it felt like forever. But forever is a fragile word. And sometimes, even the strongest beginnings carry storms we don't notice until they arrive. And ours was on its way. You know, it's strange how you don't notice the beginning of the end. Not when it's happening. Not when you're still holding on. Not when you still believe love will fix everything. The cracks, they don't appear loudly. They start quietly, softly, almost politely. And ours began with small things. A forgotten message. A shorter call. A distracted tone. A silence that felt heavier than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. People get busy. People get tired. People have bad days. Busy started happening every day. Tired became the new normal. And the boy who once told me everything started telling me nothing. I remember the first time I felt the shift. He was talking, or maybe pretending to talk. And even though he was right there, he felt far, too far, like he was drifting to a place where my voice couldn't reach him. I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he said the two words people often use when they're anything but okay. I'm fine. But he wasn't. And I wasn't either. Something was changing between us, and I didn't know how to stop it. Soon, our conversations became shorter. Our laughs became rarer. Our moments had more pauses than words. And those pauses? They weren't comfortable anymore. They weren't soft or warm or familiar. They were cold. They were distant. They were the kind of silences that broke you from the inside. I started overthinking everything. Every message. Every delay. Every change in his tone. I kept asking myself, did I do something wrong? Did he get tired of me? Is he slipping away? And the worst part? I didn't know how to ask without sounding scared. But I was scared. Scared of losing someone who felt like home. Scared of waking up one day and realizing all the warmth we built was gone. There were moments when he'd pull away emotionally. Not in a dramatic way, not with anger or arguments, but in a quiet, painful way that felt like he was building walls. One brick at a time. Brick. By brick. By brick. And I was standing outside, trying to knock softly, because I didn't want to push him further away. Some days he was his old self. The boy I knew. The boy I loved. He'd laugh. People think heartbreak happens on the day everything ends. But no. Heartbreak begins long before the goodbye. It begins the day you feel someone slipping. And no matter how tightly you hold onto their hand, their fingers start loosening, one by one, until the space between your palms becomes too big to ignore. I started pretending I wasn't hurt. He started pretending nothing was changing. And somehow, we were both acting like strangers, while calling each other mine. I didn't want to lose him. He didn't want to talk about what was wrong. And love. Love became something we were trying to repair, without even knowing where the cracks really were. Sometimes I'd stare at his messages for minutes, reading between the lines, searching for the boy who used to talk to me with warmth. Sometimes I'd hear his voice, and try to convince myself it still sounded like home. But deep down, deep down, I knew something was breaking. Not loudly, not suddenly, but slowly, in small pieces. I couldn't gather fast enough. And that's when it hit me. Love isn't always lost in big moments. Sometimes, it's lost in the quiet ways two people stop trying, without meaning to. The cracks had begun, and I had no idea how much deeper they were about to go. You know, people think breakups happen in one moment. One fight, one mistake, one final sentence that ends everything. But ours didn't end with shouting or anger or betrayal. It ended in something much quieter, much more painful. It ended in exhaustion. Not the kind you feel in your body, the kind that settles deep in your heart, where you keep trying and trying, until you realize you're the only one still holding the weight of something that used to be shared. I remember the exact day things finally broke. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't even a conversation that started with a problem. It started with me saying, and he replied with something I never expected to hear. I don't know what to do anymore. Not, I miss you too. Not, I'm here. Not, we'll fix this. Just confusion. Just distance. Just a tired truth he couldn't hide anymore. I felt my heart drop. Slowly. Like an anchor sinking into water. Something inside me whispered, this is it. But I still tried. I still fought. I still held on. Talk to me, I said. Tell me what's wrong. We can fix this. But his silence said what his words didn't. He wasn't leaving because he stopped loving me. He was leaving because he didn't know how to love me anymore, without hurting both of us. It's strange, isn't it? How love can still be there, but everything else around it falls apart. We didn't yell. We didn't blame. We didn't accuse. We just broke. Quietly. I remember my voice shaking when I finally asked the question I had been terrified of for days. Do you still want this? He looked away. Not in anger. Not in irritation. But in guilt. Guilt hurts more than anger. Because guilt means they care. But not enough to stay. He whispered, I don't know. And that was the moment. That was the moment my heart stopped fighting. Because I don't know is just a softer way of saying, I can't. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of him. I tried to breathe, but every breath felt like glass. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood. Sometimes, love isn't enough to... He just looked at me, with that sadness in his eyes. The kind of sadness that comes from knowing you're losing something you'll never find again. I wanted him to say something. Anything. One word. One reason to stay. But he didn't. And I realized, sometimes the absence of words is the answer. When I walked away that day, I felt my heart splitting into pieces. Not loudly, but painfully. I didn't cry immediately. I didn't collapse. I didn't fall apart. Not because I was strong, but because heartbreak doesn't always hit you instantly. It waits. It follows. It grows slowly, until one tiny moment triggers the flood. For me, that moment came hours later, when I saw his name in my phone, and realized I had nowhere to send the message I was typing. We weren't us anymore. We weren't lovers. We weren't partners. We weren't forever. We were a story that reached its final page, long before either of us was ready to stop reading. That was the breaking point. The moment we ended. Not because the love died, but because we didn't know how to save it. And somehow, that hurts even more. The days after a breakup, they don't feel real. It's like you're walking through life with an echo behind you. A shadow of someone who used to be there. Someone whose presence your heart still expects, even though your mind knows they're gone. The first morning without him, I woke up and instinctively reached for my phone. Not to check messages, but to check his message. Except, there was nothing. No, good morning. No, did you sleep well? Not even a missed call. Just silence. A silence so loud, it filled the entire room. I didn't cry immediately. You don't cry for the person you lost. You cry for the version of you that existed when you had them. And I was slowly realizing, I wasn't that girl anymore. I felt everything and nothing. Other moments, one small memory, would hit me like a wave. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. A song, a place, a picture, a joke he once made. Everything reminded me of him. And every reminder felt like a quiet punch to the heart. But what hurt the most was not the memories. It was the distance. Not the physical kind. The emotional kind. The kind where you want to talk to them, but you don't know if you're still allowed. The kind where you type a long message and then delete it because we aren't together anymore. The kind where you see something funny and instinctively think, he would have loved this, but you don't send it. The kind where you hear your phone buzz, and for 1 second your heart leaps, only to sink. When it's not his name, I still loved him. Quietly. From a distance. In ways no one else could see. It wasn't the obsessive kind of love. It wasn't begging or pleading or chasing. It was gentle love. Soft love. The kind that stays in the background of your life. Present. But quiet. A love that whispers, I hope you're okay, even though it can't ask. I wondered if he missed me too. If he thought of me when he couldn't sleep. If he ever picked up his phone, then stopped himself. Because it was easier to stay silent. But I didn't ask. I didn't want to make it harder for either of us. So we became two people who once meant everything to each other. Walking around with memories we couldn't talk about anymore. Sometimes that reality hit me out of nowhere. I'd be laughing with friends, and suddenly I'd feel that ache again. The one you hide behind smiles. They didn't know how much I missed him. They didn't know how many times I forced myself not to reach out. They didn't know that every night I had to remind myself why letting go is the right thing. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy. It's unpredictable. Some days I felt strong, sure of my decision. Other days, I felt like I had lost something I would never find again. I didn't delete our pictures. I didn't block him. I didn't erase anything, because erasing him felt like erasing a part of myself. Instead, I let the pain stay. I let the memory sit. I let the love remain. Softly, quietly, with no expectations. And slowly, very slowly, I learned to live with the silence. Not because the love disappeared, but because I realized some love stories aren't meant to be held forever. Some love stories teach you something, shape you, grow you, break you, so you can rebuild. Some love stories end without really ending. They just change form. He wasn't mine anymore. But the love we shared, the memories, the lessons, the gentle moments, they were still a part of me. And maybe they always would be. Healing doesn't look the way people describe it. It's not this clean, beautiful transformation. It's not a sunrise after a long storm. It's not waking up one day and suddenly feeling okay. Healing is quieter than that. It happens in small moments. Moments you don't even realize are healing you. For me, acceptance didn't come in one big realization. It came slowly. In the morning, I woke up and didn't check my phone hoping for a message. In the evening, I listened to our old playlist and, for the first time, didn't cry. In the little breath I released when I passed a place we used to go. And it didn't suffocate me anymore. It wasn't that he stopped mattering. It was just that I finally learned how to carry the memories without letting them crush me. I didn't erase him from my life. I didn't pretend he never existed. I didn't hate him. I didn't blame him. Because the truth is, when someone once meant the world to you, you don't just move on. You move differently. You grow around the love. You grow around, but both were part of the journey. There were days I felt strong, confident, independent, almost healed. And then there were days when one tiny memory would pull me back into the ache I thought I had outgrown. And that's okay. That's what I learned. Healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering without falling apart. I realized something else too. Loving someone doesn't end the moment they leave your life. Love changes, evolves, softens. But it doesn't disappear. Some love turns quiet. Some love stays in the background of your heart. Not loud. Not painful. Just present. A reminder of who you were. Who you loved. And how deeply you're capable of feeling. I think a part of me will always love him. Not in a way that waits. Or hopes. Or expects. But in a way that's honest. In a way that respects what we had. In a way that wishes him well. No matter where he is now. No matter who he becomes. There are days I imagine seeing him again. Not with pain. But with a soft smile. Maybe in some cafe. Maybe on a random street. Maybe somewhere unexpected. And we would look at each other. Not as strangers. Not as lovers. But as two people who shared something real. Something that changed us. Something that shaped us. Something that didn't need a forever to matter. Because not all great loves stay. Some just visit for a while. Long enough to teach you something. To change something inside you. To show you a version of yourself you might have never discovered. And that's what he was for me. A chapter that hurt to end. But one I'm grateful I lived. Sometimes I still think of him. Not with sadness. But with warmth. With gratitude. With a soft ache. Maybe we weren't meant to stay. Maybe we were meant to grow. Separately. Quietly. In ways we couldn't have if we had held on to each other too tightly. He was my lesson. My memory. My softest goodbye. And I finally learned to accept that. But acceptance doesn't erase everything. Sometimes, before I fall asleep, a thought crosses my mind. I hope he's doing okay. And maybe, somewhere out there, he thinks the same about me. There are days when I wake up with an ache in my chest. Not painful, not heavy. Just a quiet reminder of everything I once felt. And everything I learned to let go of. On those days, I pack a small bag, grab my headphones, and leave the house without a fixed destination. Some people think I travel alone because I love solitude. Others assume I enjoy the freedom of wandering, without anyone questioning me. But the truth is quieter, softer. and a little harder to explain. I travel alone because moving helps me breathe, because unfamiliar places make it easier to understand my own heart, because sometimes walking through streets that hold no memories of us helps me remember who I am without the weight of what I lost. There's something comforting about blending into a crowd of strangers. No expectations, no past, no familiar faces to trigger familiar pain. Just me, just the world, just the silence I've learned to carry without breaking. I sit by windows in cafes I've never been to. I watch people laugh, argue, hurry, dream. And in those moments, I feel connected to something bigger. Not just a memory, not just a story, but life itself. Sometimes while I'm traveling, a thought of him slips in, not in a heartbreaking way, but in a quiet, reflective way. I wonder how he's doing, if he still drinks his coffee too hot. I just remember, and then I let the memory pass, like a cloud drifting across the sky, acknowledged, appreciated, but not held on to. Traveling alone taught me something that staying still never could. Healing isn't something you find. It's something you create. Step by step. Moment by moment. Mile by mile. Each new place I visit feels like a tiny stitch, sewing together the parts of me that once felt torn open. I learned to enjoy my own company, to sit with my thoughts without fearing them, to watch sunsets alone and still feel whole, to walk through unfamiliar streets and not feel lost. Somewhere along the way, I realized something profound. I wasn't mourning him anymore. I was mourning the version of myself who loved him so deeply, so fearlessly, so purely. And once I understood that, everything shifted. I stopped traveling to escape. I started traveling to grow. I stopped searching for closure. I learned to live without it. I stopped waiting for the pain to disappear. I accepted that some things remain tender forever. And that's okay, because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the memory, without letting it control your steps. I still travel alone sometimes, not because I'm lonely, but because those quiet journeys remind me of how far I've come. They remind me that losing someone doesn't mean losing myself, that endings, even painful ones, can shape us into softer, wiser versions of who we were. And every time I stand somewhere new, a hilltop, a quiet beach, a bustling city street, I feel a sense of peace that once felt impossible. In those moments, I silently thank him for the love that changed me, even though it didn't stay, for the memories that hurt me, but taught me, for the goodbye that broke me, but made me stronger. Some love stories don't end with reunion. Some end with growth, with acceptance, with two people living different lives, but carrying the same gentle memory. And that's why I travel alone sometimes. Because in the quiet of unfamiliar places, I finally understood. Our love was real. Our ending was real. And both of them shaped me into someone who can stand alone and still love deeply without falling apart.